you can see the, let's see, yeah, you can sort of see on the, towards the right side of the screen, there's somebody in the luggage backpack. That should be.
Do you want to introduce them?
Oh, okay. Thank God, doing okay, kids are great. Well, it's 3 and a bit, and almost 10.
Well,
Yeah.
so it's been.
Yeah, and, you know, we're still healthy, we maintained our health throughout this whole thing. That's so good. Yeah.
Is it being recorded or just thinking for people who don't make it?
Yeah, it will be. We're just unfortunately having some issues with the live stream. It's not starting. I don't know why, but we'll just need to wait a minute.
Yeah, yeah, we can hear you in the room. And you can hear us.
Good. Good. Looking great. Thank you. What the heck? This is not working. I'm gonna try this.
No, you're getting it live on the Zoom. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I know what the ones do. One. Yeah, so that's what we're trying to look for.
I've got an idea, maybe. Can you also here log in on this too? I'm gonna try using my phone.
Hi there.
It's pretty good.
And what if it's-
And you know what? I can set that up in more places. Then I will simply
We have your package. Yeah.
it's not.
Yeah, so your assignment had to do the box.
Also, it's-
We must get that to you.
Yeah, it should be.
Yeah, how are you guys doing?
Oh, select certificate. Use.
Sign first time.
Yeah.
There we go. Let's try that now. Yeah.
Not sure.
All right, we're going to be starting very soon. Sorry about the technical difficulties. Please excuse that. We'll be ready to go in just a few minutes. Backup plan. It's the phone. Okay.
How are you doing, Mark?
Thank God, doing okay.
Did you have a good Passover?
We.
As well as Passover goes, right? It's like, it's not the holiday of our freedom, it's the holiday of our slavery. Right? That's, we consider ourselves as if we personally brought out of Egypt.
definitely
And
see
we were in
that.
Egypt the past week, like total
And I need to see the screen. And the screen
too.
too. Okay. Right.
Now we can breathe, now we can eat again, we're free.
Can't have it like that. Okay, well, this will.
That's it. Rabbis have it all wrong.
Let me see if I can put this a little further out. Sorry. Sorry, guys.
Very nice, yeah. Family.
Can we?
can
Ah, there we go.
coming together.
That works. Let me see if I can. I don't know why it wasn't working.
And otherwise, how are your lives?
Pretty well. I just want to get this.
My oldest is graduating from high school this year and we're moving away to university. So lots of feelings there, but yes, it's doing really well. Little one's growing up too.
How old is your little one?
13.
Aha.
Mhm.
That's
And
a
your
little.
bat mitzvah this year. Yeah, Shayna's coming back. How about you and yours?
Me and mine are doing great. I've got a 10-year-old and a 3-year-old.
3. Mazel tov.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, my older one is, she's doing her own thing. She's got her own place, her own life, etc. She's in 32-ish, 32, 33, somewhere in there. But the little ones
All
are
right, I
doing
think
great.
we've got.
Wow.
Big event. The
Okay, guys.
3-year-old is just completely
is live.
trained. I mean, these are
Okay,
milestones.
thank you.
It's live, so it's picking up your conversation.
That's
Yeah.
okay. They can hear about the potty training.
We got 6 people online, so.
Oh, the video.
Yeah. Where did Oreo go?
Solves all our problems. She's saying no, she tries not to, so we'll have to.
Yes. I remember she talked.
I have a question for you all. So Bonnie had a storytelling, like presentation that she wanted some friends to do, and she had divided it up into roles. But one of the people who was given a role isn't here today. So I'm wondering if somebody wants to jump in and read where it says FFAT. She's abroad. Yeah, she's just being a dog, so she was delayed in coming back. But yeah, I'm just like wondering if somebody would want to jump in and do her role. Yeah. Okay. Here you go. Thank you. I can see the photo. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks so much.
There we go.
So we're good?
Yeah, we're
So
good.
Marilyn's just gonna do it from there.
What's that?
Marilyn's just gonna do it from there.
Yeah, Carolyn's doing it from there, yeah. Carolyn also has some good stuff to say.
Came to sort of launches and.
Yes.
Yeah,
Different talks, panels.
Not the only thing.
No, but in its.
Okay, great. Okay, people good to go. Just, is Liam,
I'm terrible with names, but it's like I forgot your name now. Yeah, Lorena. I'm really
hello, folks. Hi, everyone.
good at faces.
How's the sound?
Good.
Okay. Awesome. Okay, great. Welcome. Your family, friends, colleagues, community members, people otherwise uncategorized, friends of Bonnie, who knew Bonnie, didn't know Bonnie, knew of Bonnie, welcome. Thank you for being here in memory and celebration of the late Dr. Bonnie Burstow. For those of you who are here in person, those of you who are here online, again, a very warm welcome. It's indeed very warm in here. It's 29 Celsius. So most of us are probably sweating and wanting to be. My name is Simon, and I'll be co-chairing this event today with the Reverend Dr. Sherry DeNovo. Sherry. So just a couple of housekeeping items. You're not confined to your seats. You can get up and walk around, mingle, talk. It's supposed to be a community event of dialogue and chat and conversation and food in the back, coffee and tea in the back. The bathrooms are way down the hall, that way past the elevators on your right-hand side if you need them. So I knew Bonnie for about 12 years. She served as my academic supervisor for both my graduate degrees here at OASE. But more importantly, she was a good friend and mentor and my counsel many times. As a scholar, Bonnie moved the world. She really moved the world in so many ways. She published many books, including several novels, many artistic and scholarly publications. I think I counted close to 200, but I could be wrong. But her ripple impact in the world is even more important than the scholarly work that she did, because it's going to continue on living through many communities, many institutions for many generations to come. So thank you, Bonnie, for that. Bonnie set up a bunch of scholarships. A few, she set them up when she was alive, and one grew substantially as a result of the liquidation of her estate that went into this really massive scholarship. So she set up a total of 5 scholarships. 3 of them are at U of T. One is the Burstow Scholarship for Research into Anti-Semitism. The other is the Burstow Scholarship for Research into Violence Against Indigenous Women. And the third one at U of T is the Burstow Scholarship for Studies in Activism from the Margins. She has set up 2 other ones, one at TMU, or the Toronto Metropolitan University, formerly known as Ryerson. That one is in critical mental health studies and math studies, and a 5th scholarship that she set up at York University in math studies as well. She was a powerhouse scholar. Bonnie was a courageous activist, and she was an original thinker. As a friend and activist, she was sensitive, and she was unyieldingly present. Just totally there all the time, whenever you needed her. Her mission was to reimagine and recreate a world free of violence, free of oppression and marginality, and vibrant in every respect. As a teacher, Bonnie still was all these things, and her students will attest to all these facts, even today. As an indication of how Bonnie cared for, loved, and encouraged her students, I'm going to leave you with a small excerpt from her philosophy of teaching statement that I pulled out just the other day. She says, "What I see students as asking from me and or minimally having a right to expect is that I will at once help them see the world in new ways and help them contribute to social justice, while at the same time helping them become more authentically both who they are and who they can become, as knowers, as actors in a moral universe, and as creative human beings. There is no way of knowing how much of what happens can be attributed to what we as educators bring, how much it is that students make of what we bring, and how many of our students could have gotten where they needed to go on their own. And so getting out of their way is our major contribution. I ask students to engage with each other and with oppressed communities, to problematize, to identify obstacles to hope and aspirations, and to engage in the transformative acts needed to create the world together." Those are Bonnie's words. So the rest of the event today is going to involve Jerry speaking a little bit, Shandel, who is the executor of Bonnie's estate, saying a couple of words. We're going to hear from a couple of Bonnie's colleagues. We're going to show a lovely video that Efrat Gold produced. And we'll have a few words from Kappa. We'll hear from a Kappa representative to come and speak to us today. We're going to do a little spoken performance for you as per Bonnie's wishes. And then we'll end with an open mic for folks to say a few words about Bonnie if so they wish. And for that, I please urge you to exercise a little bit of brevity, although there aren't very many of us today, so you can speak as you wish, but may I ask to limit it to about 5 minutes if you end up speaking. Sherry.
Thanks, Simon, and welcome everyone. So I've known Bonnie for about 16 years, and I met her really met her. I knew Dawn before that. I think I've known Dawn since I was born at Phoenix Rising when I was up at York University. I was sort of remembering with Simon the days at York University when University of Toronto were running Rats Through Mazes, and at York we were reading R.D. Laing and Thomas Saz and anti-psychiatry, and we're talking the 70s now. So there's nothing new about any of this. I met Bonnie when I was elected in 2006 as a member of provincial parliament in Ontario, and one of the first bills I think that I worked on was to, first of all, wanted to banish electroshock therapy. That I couldn't even get through my own NDP caucus. So we, amended that to delisting it from OHIP. That created quite a bit of press, and I will always remember Bonnie for going up against any psychiatrist that usually University of Toronto could throw at us on CBC or CTV or any of the other major networks, and she would decimate them in debate. So that was Bonnie, and I think her work, Psychiatry and the Business of Madness, is seminal. I mean, I can't think of another book like it. I don't have one now because I keep getting it and giving it away to people. It needs to be read by everyone who has anything to do with the medical world, anything to do with the sociological world, anything to do with our world. It's a brilliant book, and it really highlights the problems that we're up against. There are very few people here, and I think that's kind of in keeping with Bonnie, because my other memories of Bonnie are showing up to demonstrations. It'd be Dawn and Bonnie and me and maybe one or two others, and we would be standing outside a convention of psychiatrists. There'd be 1,000 people at Metro Center, and there'd just be a few of us. So it's not about quantity, but it is about the incredible activism, the incredible revolutionary dynamism of who she was and what she stood for. And so, no surprise, not a lot of people. And I was saying to Simon again before that in my area, west end of Toronto, Parkdale High Park, that I represented for almost 12 years before I decided I didn't want to run again, we have a large group of Tibetans. And when you think of Tibetans, you think of the Dalai Lama, of course, kind of an international celebrity, but there are very few Tibetans in the world. In fact, in Toronto, we have about 5,000, and that's one of the biggest Tibetan communities outside of Nepal. And yet they're up against China, the Chinese government. And I would always say to them, what I'm saying here, in essence, is that there's no question that you will win, and they wanted autonomy, and they want autonomy. The only question is when. There is no question that the ideas that Bonnie stood for, the ideas of inclusion, the ideas of health, really. The idea is that healing should be about healing and not about money, that it shouldn't be about large corporations, that it should be about individuals who need help. Those ideas will win, there's no question. The only question is when. And when we look at the status quo right now, it may seem like a distant dream, but let me tell you, there have been many distant dreams in my life that have come true. From the fall of the Soviet Union that I never thought would happen without a Third World War, to the end of the Vietnam War that I never thought would happen, to the inclusion of queer rights and banning conversion therapy that I never thought would happen. In 1971, I was part of a small group of queer activists that marched on Parliament Hill, the only woman, and we asked for such utopian things that we never thought we would get, like equal marriage, like not being fired because you were queer, like equal housing. We won every single thing that we asked for. So there's no question that this small group of people here commemorating Bonnie, and whoever watches this video after today, there is no question that all of the goals that you stand for, that you fought for, and Bonnie that you fought for, because remembering is a process of remembering, bringing Bonnie back into membership in this community. There's no question, Bonnie, that what you fought for, you will win. And we thank you for that. We thank you for being an elder. We thank you for being the forerunner of all of this. We thank you for the books you've written, and we thank you for the incredible work that went into your life. And we thank you with an endless, endless, endless flow of love. That's who you are to us. So, having said that, I would invite Shindle to come up.
Thank you, Sherry. I'm so glad to be here today with friends and community to remember Bonnie. This is actually an event that Bonnie had envisioned. It's just that it was delayed because, as you know, shortly after her passing, there was the pandemic that started. But we always intended to hold this event. She wanted a memorial at Boise with students and friends and colleagues and members of the anti-psychiatry activist community, psych survivors, MAD identified people to come together. And as we would expect from Bonnie, she really wanted us all to participate. All were welcome who would want to participate. So glad to be here with you all today. Those who were loved by Bonnie and those who loved Bonnie. I actually have some words that I want to share with you that Bonnie had left for you all. These are her final words to you that she wanted me to read. I love you, and my life has been enriched by what we have shared together. Unlike the fool in Shakespeare's Twelfth Night, who declares himself worse off for his friends, I have always been much the better for my friends, colleagues, and students. You have taught me, touched me, and helped me make the world my home. My apologies if I have been a burden to any of you in my final days. Knowing my capacity for terror, I suspect in advance that in some cases, this may be so. Be aware that I have thought of you so often as the decades rolled by, usually with excitement, oh, so often with wonder and gratitude. What times we have had, personally, in some cases professionally, in some communally, and what a mitzvah it has been to think and talk and hope and dream and disrupt and create and build and tread together through time and space and meaning. Thank you for the gifts of knowing you, being known by you, and journeying together. Thank you for letting me into your heart. Take care of yourselves. Take care of the world. Shalom. Thank you all for being here and making this a meaningful event. To you, Bonnie, you made a huge difference in our lives and in the world. And you are deeply loved. May you continue to rest in power.
Okay, all right, at this time I'd like to call on to Bonnie's colleagues. I don't have an order of speakers here. I do have on my list Marilyn Lakin and Jennifer Wemmingwans to come and say a few words. So I will see, perhaps, I don't think Marilyn can hear us.
Marilyn,
It looks like she's talking.
you're talking.
There was a little note that came up, but.
Yeah, it looks
Can't
like,
hear.
Is that, where's the Zoom interview? Is that at this, or is it behind?
and we can't hear Ruth either.
We're able to hear them before. No?
No, it's the.
Oh, it's the volume. Okay.
Could there be another cable?
It was working earlier.
We can hear each other. We can hear almost every word.
Do you think it has to do with?
You understand?
Oh, there we go.
Or lucky to you.
We couldn't hear you.
We can hear you now. Can you
We
hear
hear
us?
you now.
Yes. A little better. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. All right. You want me to talk about Bonnie?
Yes, please, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Technology has been fun. So Shangle asked me, and I'm honored to say a few words about Bonnie to start off this event. What to say about Bonnie? Survival woman, teacher, student supervisor extraordinaire, unrelenting community activist, radical feminist, author of both fiction and nonfiction, brilliant scholar, and loyal friend who inspired absolute devotion in others. But you know all of this. What you may not know is our history together. Bonnie and I were graduate students in the Department of Adult Education in the early 80s. Seems like a long time ago now. We immediately related to each other for, among other reasons, the fact that we were two of the few Jews in the department at that time who had both experienced being children of the Holocaust. Though we never talked much about it, I think we felt the connection strongly. Years later, as we re-encountered each other as department faculty, my respect for Bonnie was continually reinforced by her brilliance and empathy, as well as for her persistence in the face of increasingly debilitating illness. She never abandoned her students, despite having to lie down on a lounge to teach her classes, and continued to do her work right to the end. This included supporting me steadily in my often challenging role as department chair from 2006 to 2010. Bonnie's parting gift to Boise was a legacy donation to her cherished anti-psychiatry research, with scholarships for students studying in that area. Bonnie's scholarship, teaching, and creativity are well recognized. But if you want to learn more about her personally, I suggest you read her novel, The House on Lippincott. Although it is a work of fiction, I know it's based on her own experience growing up in a Jewish immigrant family which survived the Holocaust. And again, there's a connection there because the house on Lippincott was just a few streets away from where I lived in Toronto before I moved here to New Brunswick. The book is touted as bringing us face to face with the human condition. This is a quote: "Our ability to create joy and meaning, even under dire circumstances, human suffering, responsibility, love, betrayal, family ties, the realities of growing old, death, and the vulnerability of the human soul." Our dear Bonnie was a shining example of someone who dealt with all of these things with intelligence, grace, and tremendous strength of character, a model for all of us as we make our way in this tumultuous world. Bonnie has been and continues to be sorely missed, so I'm so glad that we're remembering her today, and thank you for including me.
Thank you, Professor Marilyn Lakin. Now I invite Professor Jennifer Winoglass to say a few words.
Oh, you said, louder please, we don't know what you said again.
Next, it's Professor Jennifer Wenigwan, who's going to come up and say a few words. Did you hear that?
Okay. Yes, thank you. That was very clear. Thank you, Marilyn.
I think the microphone is the problem, so we have to use it.
You know what, yeah. What we're going to do. We're going to do this. This is how it is. Let's do this. So I'll see you.
Okay.
Here.
Okay.
Oh, slide.
Okay. Oh, great, now I have a giant head there. I won't look. So the first time I met Bonnie was during my interview with the Adult Education and Community Development Program here at Boise. I remember distinctly asking in that interview, what counts for tenure? Bonnie leaned in and smiled softly as she questioned my question. I had to answer her question. I spoke about wanting to eventually write a second book. I had, my first book was in the works and that was a peer-reviewed book, but I wanted to know would a second book that was a non-academic publication, that is a book that would be published by a trade publisher, would that count for tenure? And Bonnie, again, did something a lot of people don't do, even now. She said, well, what's the book about? And so I explained, I said it would be a cultural critique of institutional violence from Indigenous perspectives. And Bonnie's reaction was explosive, as she stated firmly, of course, a book related to activism counts. And in that moment, I knew AECD would be the home for me. Here was a colleague that was sitting right at the table in the hiring committee who I saw valued work that was not just about publishing in top tier education journals. So as stated today, we've heard that Bonnie, as many of you know, embraced that ethos in her own work. She published novels, blogs, like Simon was saying, almost 200. I recalled interviews of books that she did with publications. And I remember when she wasn't grading papers or reviewing admission files or meeting with students, she would be sitting quietly at her computer working. And when I asked her what she was working on, she would tell me about characters and chapters and her latest novel and how she was using this form to write up a specific history of violence. And I always marveled at her creativity and endless energy to produce. And though she kept herself very busy, she would always make time when I stopped by to check in with her. She inspired me to think about adult education and community development as popular education outside of the top tier journals. And she was fierce about defending and promoting these forms of education and always encouraging me to produce work on that second book. I'm happy to report I'm finally writing that second book. Bonnie valued community and collegiality. I remember asking to audit her course on trauma during my first full year at Boise. She was delighted and made me feel very welcomed. I was so grateful for the experience. Not only was her course carefully curated with exceptional readings and resources, but she activated these readings by having class engage and work with each other in small groups and in student presentations. Bonnie's course modeled for me an excellence in grad school pedagogy, where her role as a professor facilitated a generosity of spirit and exploration. I can still see her now, a curious grin that could be quite mischievous. To reciprocate her kindness, I participated on a panel organized by her on intergenerational survivors. Some of you, I'm sure, were there and remember that panel. At that evening, I spoke to the fact that child welfare agencies weren't doing enough, and still aren't doing enough, to support transparency and accountability in their disclosure service to former wards. Unbeknown to me or Bonnie, that evening had quite a contingent of social workers in the audience who reported my talk to their director. The next day, I got a call from the director of disclosure services stating that they would begin to assemble an open file. That is, as open as they could make it. Bonnie and I shared a good moment over that. Not quite laughter, not quite sadness, just the knowing of, yeah, let's see what happens. I opened that file recently. For several reasons, I just let it sit there. I wish I could have shared the contents of that file with Bonnie. I am sure it would have been good medicine to share it with her, as she would be equally disgusted with the institutional assessments and analysis presented throughout. Bonnie knew how to bring in the antidote to the machine. Right here in the Nexus Lounge, she organized a beautiful talk, for some again you might remember, with Dr. Roland Christian to speak about his work. I remember him sharing and talking about his early work, The Circle Game, Shadows and Substance in the Indian Residential School Experience in Canada. This report, he reminded all of us, was published in 1994. It was also shelved that very year because it spoke to the truth of residential schools as an act of genocide and not the state-sanctioned discourse of cultural genocide that we are all familiar with from the 2015 TRC report. The audience was captivated, and discussion generated that evening spoke to Bonnie's determination to make institutional violence in all its forms transparent. For me, Bonnie was more than a role model. She was a rebel, a truth speaker, a force. In 2018, Bonnie established the Burstow Scholarship for Research into Violence Against Indigenous Women in memory of Helen Betty Osborne. This scholarship is for graduate students whose thesis work focuses on violence against Indigenous women and gives priority to students who are themselves Indigenous. I am proud to share that one of my PhD students, Robin King Stonefish, was the first Indigenous student to receive the award in 2020. Her work addresses epistemic violence experienced by Indigenous women knowledge keepers during the late 70s. Bonnie did not just speculate, theorize, or even just talk about inequity. She did something about it. She committed resources. She put theory into action. She did that every day when she made space for people who did not fit in. Today, we all miss Bonnie's quiet shuffling in the halls of ABCD. It was her home, and it was a home she made for others. Miigwech, Bonnie.
I feel like this is gonna fall apart as soon as I touch it. Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Thanks for that really visceral rendering of memories and celebration of the body. We have next a video to show you. It's a 5-minute or so video that's been prepared by one of Bonnie's former students and friends, Dr. Efrat Gold. And if I can call on to Mark to come up, please, and assist with the technology, which is right here, probably. So.
Okay, so we're going to move to the story performance next.
I heard them say something. What happened to the video?
Janelle, can you hear us?
Yes, perfectly. Thank
Okay,
you.
great. You know what, we've changed the order a little bit. We're gonna go to the story performance, and then we'll do that. 'Cause, like, I think you have to get going, so let's get that done, and then, we'll do the video afterwards, okay?
I'm not in a hurry.
All right, let's do the video. Okay, let's stick to the original, sorry, okay. Let's stick to the original, itinerary. Thanks, Mark.
Back again.
My name is Ephra Gold, and I was one of Bonnie's PhD students. Like she did with so many other students, psychiatric survivors, and friends, Bonnie profoundly changed my life. She helped me understand some of the dynamics that had deeply shaped me during my teen and young adult years, and gave me new language, concepts, and ways to engage in the world. My world grew exponentially as a result of this relationship. As a mentor and friend, Bonnie was a real character, but she never wavered in her beliefs and approaches towards the ultimate goal of psychiatric abolition. My current postdoctoral project involves curating Bonnie's decades of records of her scholarship and activism into open access digital archives to be housed on the Madness Canada website. I want to share a short clip of one of the gems I've come across through this project. An interview segment of Bonnie with her beloved longtime friend and shrink-resistant co-editor, Dawn Weitz. This clip is taken from a Vision TV broadcast that aired on February 3rd, 1989, where Bonnie and Dawn discussed their new edited collection, the importance of self-representation for psychiatric survivors, and their hope for a psychiatry-free future. A hope they knew would take beyond their lifetimes to realize. In sharing this clip, I am humbled by their foresight, dedication, and radical hope in their fight against psychiatric oppression. These are the thinkers whose work myself and countless other scholar activists are continuing as we persist in the fight against psychiatry and dare to imagine a more livable world. Enjoy.
Bonnie, I want to ask you about something you say in the book, that psychiatry itself is an abuse. What do you mean by that?
I mean that the profession exists as a profession which damages human beings, that the medical model, reducing people to chemicals, and in doing that also feeding chemicals into them that are poisons, is a disabling act. The treating of people as cause and effect mechanisms in psychiatry, every branch of psychiatry, not just chemotherapy people, every branch of psychiatry buys into that kind of positive scientific model of reducing people to cause and effect mechanisms and finding new causes, new things you could input to produce the effects you want to have. That is no way to treat a human being.
One of the things we try to do on It's About Time is to give people hope. So if psychiatry is not an alternative for people with problems, what are the alternatives?
Elsewhere is a real difficult thing. One thing I would say is that no elsewhere is better than that one. You know, is that anywhere you turn is not going to do you as much damage as this place. Beyond that, turning to other people who've had problems is obviously one answer. Self-help movements have had a very large success in being help people. They're not the only one. I mean, there's other people you can turn to. There's different kinds of counselors. There's friends. There's hopefully we can start evolving into the kind of society where we are not paying professionals to handle problems that are created by the fact that we have produced an alienating society. So I think ultimately the answer is that this society is not good for people.
And Bonnie mentioned self-help groups, which we don't have enough of. Another alternative is to have an independently run crisis center, independent of the hospital, thank you very much. No psychiatrist, social workers around. Short-term type of housing, long-term type of housing, low support, high support. We've only touched on some of these. We don't have enough of these alternatives, which should be in every major city in Canada, so people have alternatives. The trouble is we don't have enough alternatives. Most of the power, as it has been years ago, is still in the hands of the psychiatrists. We have put psychiatry on notice. This book, publicly, that what they're doing is damaging, unethical, cruel and unusual, very often, immoral, because the profession itself is based on immoral, very often dead wrong, immoral assumptions about few human beings. So we're saying days are numbered and we're going to take back our power. We may not do it in 10 or 20 years, but we're going to take back the power that psychiatrists have robbed us of.
Overall, it's systemic. Yes. I'm just saying individual trying to make a difference and try to do it. Just always is about money, there's not enough. I don't know.
You said.
Thanks, Mark. All right, so next I'd like to call on to Oriel Varga to come and say a few words on the behalf of CAPA. CAPA stands for the Coalition Against Psychiatric Assault. For those of you who don't know, it's an organization that Bonnie set up. I'm going to be wrong about this, but I think in 2004, but I'll leave it to Oriel to talk to us about CAPA and say a few words. Thank you.
Hi everyone, it's so nice to see you all. Bonnie gave her wisdom and love to all of us who were her children.
I think you should use the mic.
So Bonnie gave her wisdom and love to all of us who were her children. Oh, I see.
Okay, I'm going to say it again. Bonnie gave her wisdom and love to all of us who were her children, even if sometimes it was pointed and direct. I had an opportunity to spend quite a bit of time with Bonnie before she died, and she was getting sicker and sicker. And I do have to say it was mostly because of a plant wall that looks lovely, but is in the lobby of OISE. And she insisted that it be taken down. A week or so before she died, there was an article in the Globe and Mail that talked about her, about the wall and how it was making her sicker and sicker because, of course, all of you know she had sensitivities and plants made her sicker. And there's a quote in the article that says, "I think of the living wall as a threat to my existence." Bonnie also had a human rights claim against U of T. On January 4th, she died. I believe Bonnie would have wanted us to continue to talk about and hold U of T accountable and OISE accountable for their ableism and discrimination. And the others in this, that got sick after they had worked in this building. I know this because we talked about it and started to organize before she passed away. Bonnie Bonnie also in November, I'm not sure they're getting a little bit of feedback here, but in November, before she passed away, we created the first anti-psychiatry library in the world, TAL, Toronto Anti-Psychiatry Lending Library. This was Bonnie's, Kappa's, the Coalition Against Psychiatric Assault. It was on the 7th floor of Boise in room 7165. In the November before she died, we had the department go ahead. After she died, we were given the okay to stay there. However, in the fall of last year, the new chair of Leadership Higher Adult Education told us, well, first the staff told us we could stay, and then we were told that we need to leave. That was at 7 p.m. the same day. And this is such an insult to Bonnie, who had spent so much of her life in this institution and worked very hard. They told us that we had until the end of September, and days before the end of the September, I went into the room and the books were gone. Bonnie had dealt with this conservative institution, U of T and Boise, and the psychiatric institution in general. She would have wanted us to fight for the little piece of academic freedom here, and for the students that continue to do anti-psychiatry and critical and math studies here. I know that some of us before, shortly after she passed away, wanted the library to go up to York University, but Kappa insists, and Bonnie would have wanted it to stay here where she had spent all her time at OEC and for academic work. There is a petition online, and I invite everybody to sign it if you have not signed it yet. If you don't know where it is, you can contact me. My email address is orielvarga@hotmail.com. We have about 300 petition signatures, and we're fighting for more. Bonnie fought for the principle. She was fearless, and she would have insisted on creating an anti-psychiatry space here at Boise. And as such, we call on the Hall Library to stay here, where we still have students who insist on her knowledge, insist on it to remain. So please sign. We do have temporary solutions that we're looking into downtown. Kappa has made that clear that we want it downtown. We will hold Oise accountable and not forget her life work. We will continue to be critical and central here at Oise, where she would have wanted it. And if U of T wants, if York University wants an anti-psychiatry library, just to be clear, we're happy to help them create a second one. But Kappa continues to stay here where she created her legacy. I was talking to a longtime ally not too long ago who said if we want funding and support for the Kappa, the Coalition Against Psychiatric Assault, and the tall anti-psychiatry library, we should change the name. I understand that the climate has become more difficult since COVID. Things have shifted, but we won't back down. Kappa was created by Bonnie Burstow, was created by Dawn Weitz, another fierce anti-psychiatry fighter. And in honor of Bonnie and Dawn, and also Tucker Gomberg, so the collections of Dawn and Bonnie's estate are in the anti-psychiatry library. And Kappa was created by Bonnie and Dawn, and we won't back down. We won't concede. And this is what Bonnie would have wanted. Now, I'm going to talk about another really big thing that's going on. Because, the thing I learned from Bonnie is to be activist and to speak truth to power. There is a new form of neoliberalism that's happening, and you might or might not know about it, but it's a new formation of public-private partnership that has arisen, which is taking over our public and our private spaces. It's through coalitions and partnerships. So if you hear the word partnership and coalition, it's code for privatization. It's taking over our nonprofits, our community organizations, our government, and it's moving markets into it. And part of this collaboration and partnership agenda is a greater professionalization. And that professionalization is tied to psychiatry. And it's even taking our radical groups and co-opting our ideals. So we need to become savvy, and we need to resist. We need to be careful about the funding and where we get it, because it is tied to large foundations, including Big Pharma. And we do need to out, we need to speak, we need to resist. Before Bonnie passed away, she worked a whole year on getting the wording for her anti-psychiatry scholarship just right so that it could not be changed or subverted. 3 years later, we have a Mad Studies scholarship and not an anti-psychiatry scholarship. Now, you know, our Mad Studies, radical Mad Studies allies, we have always been allies. However, in honor of Bonnie, Bonnie would have asked us to stop sitting on the benches and talk about abolition of the medical, psychiatric, and carceral system. She would have been livid that the scholarship was changed. Now I repeat to my siblings, because I consider you all siblings, because we were all Bonnie's friends, all Bonnie's, students, and who had learned. But those of you who negotiated with U of T, I understand it was difficult. I know U of T very well, much better than I would like to admit, and I've grappled with many space campaigns, more often than I would like to admit. I've also been criminalized by U of T for peaceful protest. So I understand the challenges, but we had options. We could have withdrawn the scholarship. If Kappa would have known, we would have mounted a fierce campaign. If we would have, sorry? Oh, is there strange? She can't hear us again?
Okay.
Is this better?
Yeah, I think we can.
Yeah, go ahead.
Excellent, okay. If we would not have withdrawn the legal case, perhaps we could have used it as leverage. Bonnie would not have been happy. I think everyone knows that. It should have been an anti-psychiatry scholarship as she would have wanted it to be. I took Bonnie's trauma course, okay, and it taught me a lot. It taught me one of the first things she got us to do is not use the language of psychiatry, to avoid it entirely, and forced us to talk about trauma without using the psychiatric system language at all throughout the whole course. And trauma is about the racist, sexist, homophobic, patriarchal, ableist system that discriminates and, of course, traumatizes people. And PTSD is a psychiatric term, so we weren't treated that one either. But it taught us to avoid the regimes of ruling. And Bonnie would agree that mental health and MADS studies clusters are not terms that she would have wanted, but anti-psychiatry is what she insisted. So in honor of Bonnie, I ask that we continue her work on anti-psychiatry. We're going to try to stop sitting on the fences and out the psychiatric industry. To make sure that the anti-psychiatry tall library is reinstated at Boise in room 7165, and I know it's been turned into student offices. This is not unusual because the university always puts students against students, but students can resist. That we commit in the honor, and this is all in the petition, to honor the Professor Bonnie's work and support students in anti-psychiatry and critical research, and that we reinstate Bonnie's trauma course. We need to stay strong, and COVID has been challenging. It has. It's been very challenging. It's been challenging on me as well. And perhaps we can be gentle to each other as well, but not patronizing. The context is difficult with public-private partnerships taking over all of our public goods to move psychiatry into everything, co-opt our radical ideas and our radical work. So I want to just remind people about Bonnie's attrition model. And we need to keep this in mind in every action that we take as an organization, in our coalitions, in our work. That whatever action that we move towards the long-range goal of psychiatric abolition, that we ask, will it add legitimacy to the current system and to avoid widening the web of psychiatry? I should also say that it was lovely to see Bonnie speaking, in her younger years, but in her later years, she was not in favor of alternatives, and mostly for the reason that she said most of, if not every one of them, is co-opted by the psychiatric system, and we do need to be savvy and aware of that. But our answer here is that CAPA won't change its name. The coalition against psychiatric assault is continuing. We will continue to do radical kick-ass actions that the Tall Library, Anti-Psychiatry Library won't back down. It's going to continue here at OISE. We're going to call for it to be reinstated, even if we find we are looking into it and have almost gotten some temporary solutions here downtown. But we need to continue to honor Bonnie's work, continue to do the hard work, and stand strong and honor Bonnie's work. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Oriel, for that heartfelt and passionate contribution, and for the hard work that you and your peers and colleagues are doing, and we, all of us, in moving these causes forward. Now we can move on to the performance that we were going to do earlier, so let's do it now. So this is, Bonnie had specifically asked us to, what I want to say is underneath this computer, so I'm going to have to move it. There we go. Okay. It's a story that Bonnie wanted us to take turns telling, and she outlined everybody's role as per Bonnie and Bonnie's style, right? The story is called Bone Button Borscht. It's a retelling of a popular Jewish folk story called Stone Soup. I don't know if you've heard of it. I certainly hadn't until I read this rendition of it and went back and read the other one. So why don't you just sit back and you can mingle, talk very softly, because we're going to be talking. I think we're going to be using microphones because there's only one, there's a bunch of us. Want to do that? Okay.
The sound is broken up on this end.
It's the microphone, because we could understand you better with no mic.
Okay.
That's right.
Can you come up though, or? Yeah, okay, we could. Okay,
Yes.
is this, Marilyn, is this better?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, without the mic.
Yeah, the microphone sometimes causes it's not so much feedback, it's that the sound, there's extended sound minimizing on Zoom, and so it picks up the microphone as voice because of
So it suppresses.
it suppresses.
Okay.
I think as long as people speak close to the computer, so the mic on the computer is picking them up, that would work.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, yeah, okay, awesome, okay. One dark winter's night, a ragged little beggar hobbled along a lonely road. It was snowy and bitterly cold, but in his head, it was warm and rosy. He saw a blazing fireplace and a table loaded with bowls of borscht, noodle pudding, roast chicken, fruit, nuts, and a jug of wine. And his host was saying, "More chicken, Mr. Beggar." And he was saying,
Oh no, I couldn't eat another bite, but if you insist. There's nothing like being a beggar, he thought. Such good things it brings out in people. They share, they give, and I get a little something too. It's perfect.
The beggar reached the crest of a hill. He peered out through the driving snow into the night.
So there's the town, he asked himself. There should be a town at the bottom of this hill. I can't see it.
As he walked downhill, small, shadowy houses slowly took shape on his left and his right.
Fine, he said. Now I see the town. But where are the lights? Where are the people? He knocked on the door. Please, a little food for a starving beggar.
He cried. A face appeared at the frosty window, then vanished. There were footsteps, and then silence, but no one answered.
The beggar went to another house and knocked. Please help me. I'm hungry and cold. Go away, called a voice from within. Just let me in for a few minutes, even. No, go away. So the beggar moved on, from house to house and door to door, but no one would help him.
What is wrong with these people? He wondered.
He trudged further down the road. Suddenly, he spots a thin line of light in the snow. He follows it to a crack in the doorway, pushed the door open, and went inside. It was a synagogue.
Thanks God for shuls, synagogues, he cried, and rushed inside. As he warmed himself by the stove, he looked around the room. Suddenly, he spotted a man in the shadows. It was the shul caretaker, the shamus. Shalom Aleichem, peace be with you, called the beggar. The shamus did not answer. Strange, thought the beggar.
A glimmer crept into his eye, and the corners of his mouth turned up ever so slightly. He had an idea. He grabbed one of the bone buttons on his coat and tugged. Off came the button. Off came two more. And another. And another. Still, the shamus did not speak. But now he was looking at the beggar. Now he was curious.
The beggar counted the buttons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oi, if I only had one more button. Still, the shamus was silent. I said, oi, if I only had one more button. Finally, the shamus spoke. Look, mister, I won't give you a button. Nobody in this town will give you a button. Why not? Asked the beggar. Because we're poor, Mr. Beggar. We don't give even to each other anymore. So why should we give to a stranger even one button? Why? Asked the beggar. Because with one more button, I could make us a soup. Would make a nice hot borscht.
That's ridiculous, scoffed the shamus. Impossible. Nobody makes borscht from buttons. Mr. Shamus, said the beggar, I am shocked. Haven't you ever heard of bone button borscht? Bone button borscht? Asked the shamus.
Let me explain, said the beggar. These buttons in my hand are very, very special buttons. It's just one more button from you. I can make a bone button borscht for the whole town. I can make for you a miracle, Mr. Shamus. And naturally, the shamus became very curious.
All right, he cried. I'll get the button. And he ran to the door. Wait, called the beggar. I need bowls and cups and a knife and a ladle and a spoon. Oh, and a pot maybe? The shamus sped down the road to the tailor's door and knocked. Mendel, Mendel, give me a bone button, he called. No, go away, shouted Mendel. No, Mendel, you don't understand. The button isn't for me, said the shamus. It's for the little beggar in the synagogue. He's going to make a miracle. With my bone button, asked Mendel. What's he going to do? Raise it from the dead? Teach it to sing, maybe? No, Mendel, he needs it for the borscht. He's going to make borscht from buttons. That's impossible, scoffed Mendel. Nobody makes borscht from buttons. Listen, Mendel, said the shamus. Give me the button. What's it going to hurt? Maybe we'll have a miracle. All right, replied Mendel. I'll give you the button, but I want to come to you. I want to see this miracle. So come on, said the shamus.
So they ran to the house next door and knocked. Leah, Leah, give us a wooden spoon, they cried. No, she shouted. Go away. Leah, not for us. It's for the little baker in the synagogue. He's going to make a miracle. With my spoon? Asked Leah. What's he going to do? Use it as part of to part the Red Sea? Teach it to dance, maybe? No, Leah. He needs it for the borscht. He's going to make borscht from buttons. That's impossible, scoffed Leah. No. Look, Leah, give us a spoon. What's it going to hurt? Maybe we'll have a miracle. All right, replied Leah, but I want to come. I want to see this miracle. So come, said the shamus and the tailor. And my family too, she added. So bring them, they said.
So Leah, her family, Mendel, and the shamus marched down the street. They banged on doors. They begged and they borrowed cups and bowls, a ladle, a knife, and a huge soup pot. Along with all these things, the crowd grew. As it chattered its way up the street towards the synagogue, others came to their windows and doors. Where are you going? They asked. What are you doing with that pot? And the people in the street replied, there's a beggar in the synagogue who says he can make borscht from buttons. That's impossible, shouted the people in the houses. But they were curious. So they grabbed their hats and coats and joined the others. By the time the shamus reached the synagogue, the whole town was with him. The people crammed themselves inside. The beggar looked up and cried, Shalom Aleichem, peace be with you. There was a long silence.
Then someone called out, so, Mr. Miracle Man, give us a miracle. Oh, you want a miracle? The beggar said. I'll give you a miracle. Pot. And he put the pot on the stove. Water. Then he put in the water. Buttons. And they gave him the buttons. Plump, plump, plump. The beggars dropped in all of the buttons. He picked up the wooden spoon and stirred. And the pot began to steam and bubble. And he spooned out some water and took a sniff.
Not bad, he said, but it could be better. What could make it better? Asked the people.
A little sugar, a little salt, a little pepper. That could make it better, replied the beggar. So they brought him sugar and salt and pepper. He sprinkled them all into the pot and he stirred. Then he took another sniff. Not bad, he said, but it could be better.
What could make it better? Asked the people. Have you got any pickle juice? That would make it better, replied the beggar.
So they brought him pickle juice and he poured it into the pot. The beggar stirred and stirred and then stopped. He looked at the people. He looked at the pot. He looked at the people again and he shook his head. You got problems, Mr. Beggar? Asked the shamus. The beggar frowned. Then, said the shamus, he ran to a cupboard and brought back a bulb of garlic. Would this help, Mr. Beggar? He asked. Why not? Laughed the beggar. Mr. Beggar, I've got some carrots, somebody said. I've got beets, called another. I've got onions. I've got beans. Would these help, Mr. Beggar? They asked. They wouldn't hide, laughed the beggar. So the people ran off and returned with their arms full of vegetables. The beggar sliced them all. He diced, he chopped, he shredded. Then he dumped them all into the boiling pot, and he stirred that borscht around and around and around.
Do you know what we have here? Asked the beggar. We have a beautiful borscht. That's what we have. A very tasty borscht. Now, some people say a little bit of cabbage really brings out the flavor. But I say keep it simple. Who needs cabbage for borscht? At the back of the synagogue, a woman waved her arms. Mr. Beggar, you want cabbage? I've got cabbage, Mr. Beggar. Before he could reply, the woman was gone. She returned with a sack full of cabbages and handed it to the beggar. He looked at the cabbages, he looked at the people, then he shrugged his shoulders and began to chop. He chopped until every last cabbage had been added to the borscht. Then people watched the steam rise from the pot. They listened to the bubbling borscht. They smelled the rich, sweet, and sour aroma as it filled the synagogue. Bellies rumbled, mouths watered.
And everyone pressed in closer when the beggar finally ladled some borscht into a cup. It was deep red and thick with vegetables. He blew on it. He blessed it. Then he dipped in his spoon and he tasted it. Slurp, slurp, slurp. So, Mr. Beggar, how does it taste?
The beggar smiled. A bit. Who wants to try some?
Everyone in the room rushed forward. They snatched cups, they grabbed bowls. Borscht, 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 they chanted. The beggar patiently laid out steaming hot borscht into every bowl and cup. Soon everyone was slipping and slurping borscht.
Then the people raised their arms. They rolled their eyes toward heaven, and they cried out, "Delicious! Perfectly delicious! This is the best borscht we have ever tasted." The little beggar did it. He made borscht out of buttons. It's a miracle!
Then, like magic, bread appeared, and boiled potatoes, and roast chicken and wine. The people ate and they laughed and they ate. Then they brought out accordions and violins, and they sang and they danced for hours after delightful hours.
And when the last slurp of borscht was slurped, the last dance danced, and the last song sung, the shamus invited the beggar to spend the night at his house. The next night, another family took him in, and then another, and then another.
One day, the beggar gathered the townsfolk together to say goodbye. Please don't go, they begged. I must, he said. Cut your buttons. How can we make borscht without your magic bone buttons? And how can I fasten my coat without buttons? Asked the beggar. How can I keep warm without buttons?
So they traded with the beggar. They gave him brass buttons for bone buttons. Then the beggar left. They never saw him again.
The years passed. One by one, the beggar's bone buttons were lost. But it is a strange thing, a wonder perhaps.
The townsfolk learned that they didn't really need the buttons. They learned to make borscht without them, and they learned to help one another without borscht, even in hard times. That was the real miracle the beggar left behind.
Okay, so that's bone button borscht for you. Thank you everybody for that awesome performance. I remember actually doing this performance for Anne Goodman's, yes, Professor Anne Goodman's memorial when we did it here at Boise on the 7th floor. So anyway, yeah, some fun memories of Anne too. So now this is kind of like the closing part of today's event, which is an open mic event. If you want to say something, please come up and say something, and I encourage you
I have something to say, Simon.
Yes, let me just finish, and then I'll invite you, Ruth, okay? So if you want to come up and say something, please do come up and say it here, because the computer is going to capture your sound for the Zoom participants.
And this live stream is going to go off at this point.
Okay, and then we'll turn it on. Okay.
Does
Yeah.
anybody want to be on?
And thank you for visiting this live stream. Just
Is it time?
it is going to be turned off.
They can join in by Zoom.
Okay. Well,
Are you ready for me to speak, Simon?
Yep, we're good.
The sound is probably now without the mic.
okay.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Go ahead, please.
Go ahead, yeah. Okay. During the early 1990s, while still in pre-production with the Friendly Spike Theater Band play Mark Living with a Stigma, written by Ken Ennis, Dawn White, Bonnie's friend, invited us to attend a protest outside of Camp H. At this time, Dawn and Bonnie's friend, Mel Starkman, was incarcerated there. He was being routinely restrained and subjected to forced shock treatments. The purpose of the protest was to get him out. Knowing that we were actors, Dawn asked us to present some performance art. What an amazing opportunity for a psychiatric survivor actor like myself change the system. With the help of a castmate, I tied myself to a pole outside the institution and held up a sign shouting, "Restrain yourselves." When Bonnie complimented me on my creative expression, we became long-lasting friends and forever allies. Throughout the years, Bonnie was incredibly supportive of the work of the Friendly Spike, writing countless letters of support on our behalf, speaking at many of our engagements, and inviting us to perform for her students at OISD. In 2006, when Bonnie's book, The House on Lippincott, was published, she asked our group to present scenes from the novel at one of her readings. I had the honor of performing a character who I believe was based on Bonnie herself, because she asked me to wear her Star of David necklace during the performance, which I did. After Bonnie passed away in 2020, her friends, Shangle and Simon, gave me her Star of David necklace, saying she wanted me to have it. Today, Bonnie Burstow's Star of David necklace hangs in the window behind my desk. When the sunlight shines through it, like it is right now, I imagine it's her, my long-lasting friend and forever ally, Bonnie Burstow! It was a great story.
Thanks, Ruth. I have a mouthful of croissant right now. Okay, anybody else want to come up and say a few words, or mingle, eat, drink, cool off, go to the bathroom? Open floor, folks.
Just want to share a memory. I was a student of Bonnie's. I learned qualitative research from her, and it literally changed my life. There were two courses in my graduate years, master's and PhD, that changed my life. One was the qualitative course I took with Bonnie, and another was the History and Theory of Organization Development. Thank you, Marilyn. Bonnie was intimidating to anybody who didn't know her. And I remember just talking with some other students who were in that very first qualitative course, and we all were just so intimidated and so just terrified of this physically little woman who, you know, could barely move, but she was such an incredibly powerful presence. And so there are two things that Bonnie said in my presence that not only do I remember to today, but I share with all of my students that I now teach qualitative research to. And the course I teach was designed, mapping Bonnie's design with her permission. And I honor her every time I teach these courses. And so the two things that I tell my students are, number one, everything is political. That was her motto. Everything is political. You cannot make a decision. You cannot wake up in the morning. You cannot speak to another person. You certainly cannot perform an analysis of any sort without recognizing the inherent politics, the inherent power dynamics, imbalances, marginalizations, who has voice, who doesn't have voice. You need to keep this in forefront in your mind. So I share that idea. Everything is political with my students. The other thing that I share with my students among all the courses I teach is something she said to me when she basically gave me a slap down. This was during my master's work. I was developing my thesis. And she said to me, "Nobody cares what you think." I made the sin, the cardinal academic sin of starting a sentence, "I think," whatever it was. And she said to me, "Nobody cares what you think. Nobody cares what you believe. Nobody cares what you feel. When you're doing academic writing, it's what can be either demonstrated empirically or what's found in the literature. And I share that when I slap down my own students in her honor and in her name. But this idea that nobody cares what you think, what you feel, or what you believe was really at the heart of who Bonnie was, and this is something that inspires me in my work today. It's not about what you think or feel or believe, it's what you do. That's what it is. It's about taking those thoughts and feelings, beliefs, etc., and putting them into action in what you do. And that was Bonnie's life. That is her legacy. That is her spirit, and that's her inspiration for me. And so I want to share that with you. Everything's political. Nobody cares what you think.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for this privilege and opportunity to honor Dr. Bonnie Burstow. I call her the Great Double B. And my name is Judy Grant, and I'm a PhD candidate here at OISE, thanks to Double B. I first met Dr. Burstow when I came to OISE to do a Master's of Education degree. At that time, I was working as a sergeant with the Toronto Police Service at the Toronto Police College, teaching instructional techniques. And I wanted to be a better instructor there. And then I came to OISE and met folks like Bonnie and got introduced to folks like Paula Ferrer and Education for Liberation, and was able to, meeting Bonnie and others transformed my life. Dr. Burstow encouraged me to pursue my PhD because I had experienced profound oppression and violence being a Black woman in the Toronto Police Service for almost 2 decades. And I came to the academy with what I thought was just anger, but Bonnie taught me, no, you're in pain and it's okay to feel pain. And like you said, it's not about what I think and what I feel, but how do you change the world? And I too had the privilege to sit in Bonnie Burstow's Qualitative 1 and Qualitative 2 courses. And I came upon a methodology called autoethnography that uses the self, within context to explore and change the world. And Bonnie said to me, Judy, if there's one person who can and should do an autoethnographic study, it's you, because your experiences matter when you place them within the largest social political context to change the world. And I had no idea that I can go on to do a PhD, because for me, I didn't even finish high school. But Bonnie said, you can and you will. And what she had me do was a qualitative research paper. And I was so intimidated by both Bonnie and the paper that during the final writing stage, Bonnie kept emailing me, where's my paper, where's my paper, where's my paper? And I was here at OISE and I decided to go hide. Now being a cop, I thought I could hide from Bonnie. Bonnie tracked me down. I left on the 7th floor and I came up and I went to the other far side of the 12th floor. And I'm in there trying to, pick sense out of nonsense in my paper. And who shows up at the door? Bonnie. Bonnie says, Judy, where's my paper? I said, Bonnie, I swear I'm almost finished. She said, you have 1 hour. I'm downstairs waiting. And I took that final hour and I don't know how I did it, but I finished that qualitative research paper. It was 65 pages and I thought that was overwhelming. Well, within 2 hours, I got my paper back with detailed feedback and an A+. And that's when I knew that I could do it and that I mattered. So I just want to say thank you so much, Bonnie. And I'm almost at the finish line. I could not cross the finish line without her. She introduced me to amazing people, amazing friends who I will have in my life, hopefully forever. So wherever you are today, Bonnie, I know that you're shining down. The other night I was downstairs on the 7th floor trying to finish off my first draft to send to my supervisor. I came in at 9 a.m. to write. And there's a picture of Bonnie on the wall in the Peace Lounge, okay? And I decided I'm not gonna leave until I finish that draft. And midnight came and met me, and I looked around and I thought, okay, it's time to pack it up and go. And there was Bonnie looking at me. And I stayed and I wrote a little bit more. And at 3:30 a.m., I don't know how I did it still, because I work long shifts, but nothing like that. I looked around and I saw Bonnie again. And then I got to hit send. And I sent off my first draft, which came back with excellent reviews. So thank you so much, Bonnie, wherever you are, Double B. I love you. I'll never forget you as long as I live. And I'm just going to end with a quote from Dr. Maya Angelou. And she said, you know, there is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. End of quote. And thanks to you, Bonnie, I'm able to share my story and link it to the larger socio-political context to help to change this world. Thank you. May you rest in power.
Anybody else? Should we end it? Simon, should we end the Zoom?
Okay, I hadn't really thought of it, but okay. You see my chin there. I moved into Bonnie's place as a tenant in 1997. And all right. And I was there for 12 years as her tenant. And yeah, she slowly transformed from landlady to a very close friend and mentor. And she was a very important part of my education. And in very intangible ways, like I had no credentials or degrees or anything to show for it. But yeah, she helped shape like, I don't know, the scholarly aspect of my writing and the precision and all kinds of things like that. And yeah, I hope to have work, temporarily front burner work to market shortly. An analysis and critique of psychiatry. And yeah, we'll see how that goes. But yeah, thank you, Bonnie. That's all I can think of right now. But yeah, it's yeah, I can't think of anything else. I didn't plan this, but it's yeah, an extraordinary woman. I miss her terribly, and she's a presence. Like people that are very close to me, or to you, or that you've lost. You never get over it, and I don't want to. And yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Do I have to hold anything or just speak?
No, just go ahead and speak. You stand right here.
Okay. I'm Margot Smith, and I've known Bonnie since 1968. She was a student of my mother's, and my mother told her when she was coming to do a graduate degree, because this was in Winnipeg, when she was coming to do a graduate degree, that she should look up me, that we would be good for each other, and we would be good friends. Well, we met in 1968 and hated each other. Absolutely, totally different ways of thinking.
I even knew it then, even before I hardly knew her at all. And what people have been saying has reminded me of that. I am not a thinker. I'm a feeler. I mean, I'm a rational vision, in my own way, visionary feeler, but I'm not a thinker. Although I can do good analysis, it's just not the important thing. It tells me the limits that lead me to the important thing, which is through feelings. So Bonnie and I, as I say, had this friendship for a long time. She went through rough times in the 70s, the early 70s, really rough times. And she somehow made me the person she had to call whenever she had a crisis, whether it was at 3 o'clock in the morning or any time of the day. And I guess I became family, because it's valid because I had no family and she had no family. And but the Bonnie I know is not the Bonnie of academics. We quarreled all the time, and she entered me into her academic world because she had me read everything she wrote before she went to the final draft. And I reacted differently than her in many things. Much of it I was just thought it was stunning and overwhelmed and beautiful and so articulate and precise and thorough. And I'm not a thorough person. I was always embarrassed by how thorough she was compared to me. But she actually, and I got into fights though about some of the ways she was doing things, because I decided I was the general, reasonably intelligent public that she also wanted to meet and have read her books and like them. So every time she went too far off, or somehow her explanations were for me too complicated for a general public person to appreciate, I would jump in and have a fight with her. Some of them I won. I also got her to change a couple of things in each of her, well, in House on Lippincott, yeah. There was one point where she didn't make a certain character important enough, so I changed that. I mean, that's me boasting about having an influence on Bonnie, you know. But what I want to say is that she was just like us all. She needed somebody. And she could be ornery. Well, you probably knew she could be ornery, but she could be scared. She could be whiny. She could be all sorts of things. And of course, I was the same with her. We balanced each other out that way. And I want to say that I thank you so much for bringing her back to me, because I had somewhat left her behind. And the week knowing you were doing it, I was reading her the Radical Feminist Therapy, which I think has some answers to the end of her Psychiatry in the Business of Madness. If there were a way one could take out of the energy and analysis and way of working in radical feminist therapy and apply it to the larger political world, I think we could, because it was so detailed, it was so grounded. The examples were so real. They weren't, she wasn't talking about general society, but she was talking about general society. So that's one of my thoughts that I had this week. But I'm almost running out of steam. Anyway, what I want to say is today, you gave me, I got some of all of you on the phone calls, because we ended up, to save myself from being woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning, I set up a situation with Bonnie, which was that I would call her, not that she would call me. I knew her calling me was not what was needed. It was needed that I call her. I would call her every Saturday morning at 8:30. And I did for, I don't know how many years, I think could be 20 years that I did this. And I got to know a lot of what went on in OASI, what went on with some of your names with familiar, some of the people that were here at various book launches and things like that were familiar, but I only knew them through Bonnie's phone calls. And you brought them back to life for me. For that, I'm very grateful. Thank you. No.
Yeah, I think we can turn off. Yeah, okay.
I just thought I was gonna have my voice.
Okay, well, this is, this brings us to the end of today, but not the end of the celebration of Bonnie. So thank you for being with us today, and thank you, Ruth and Marilyn, for plowing through the technology and rallying and being with us as well. Take good care. Please eat the food, drink the drinks, and chat among each other.
Bye, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Marilyn. Bye, Marilyn. Okay, thank you, Mark.
Been a pleasure.
Good to see you again.
Be well, everybody.
She recently made a documentary for the last few years.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
Show you better pictures. This one I posted on the rescues Facebook page. It's not me. It's This is not support the church, but I posted it has 3 million views. One picture that has 3 million views. This one has 3 million views. And yes, and if she likes it, yes, she does let me stroke her under there. She does let me.
So she trusts people then.
Well, if she gets to know them. But yes, I can do it. I've been able to do it since day one. I don't know, like, when I first, yes, she did, like, and we're not talking, like, there was no time to get used to me or anything in that sense, like, immediately the first time I saw her, she let me do it. Yeah.
It's definitely energy.
Oh yeah, there's water.
Perfect, I'm burning
Yeah, there's
up.
water.
Tuesday, now I just love you.
Then you're also like we're saying what to do.
So then the report happened. I feel like a kid. I'm okay, Jen. I'm gonna get some review.
Sometimes they'll do is they'll recreate the story. But I actually found out about Bonnie because I was something that probably is really, I never really liked that. It's like how they're doing I never was interested in it's just not necessarily good. Not a lot of people can say they like it, but they don't say yeah, and that's probably maybe because like there's no easy way. Sometimes like I people have like and I would have loved to take her and she's like, I just got to play with you. Yeah, it's so bad. They don't like taking it. Didn't pay attention. But they treat you after the I don't like the term cringy. So yeah, I was just I'm small. Right? Well, I told Oriel that she was wrong. It's because there's people who voted directly for you who are not every institution. I cannot wrong with that. She can see her. Oh my God, there's stars. Honestly, I hate to say this out loud. Yes. But I'm I hate to say this out loud. It's an element instead of where you have it. And how I find that. How like he was it's a bit conspiratorial. It's happened to a lot of organizations. You know, people hang out for a bit.
Oh, yeah, sure.
I thought there was going to be way more people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No, they all tell me what.
Every time I see the Bible, it's tempting.
Yeah. Oh, he's getting out of jail?
Right.
Yeah. There we go.
Sometimes I feel like I'm going to jail when I wake up in the morning.
Yeah.
So you're retired kind of just writing right now?
Yeah. So I don't like the idea of being dependent on the government, on the state. And so, and hopefully that won't be for too long. Like it's, I'm working hard on my writing.
Can I take your chair?
No, not at all. No.
The state, you mean like writing will kick off?
Yeah. Like I prefer supporting myself rather than
sure it'll
the
happen.
government supporting me. And, working hard on my life.
Yeah, you don't want to be dependent on anything. You want to be dependent on yourself.
Yeah. But
I kind of feel the same way. Although I'll tell you the truth, I just can't afford to retire anyway.
Really?
The old age pension won't give me enough. I just didn't put enough away. But I'm lucky because I can wake up in the morning and just be there and contribute. I end up contributing as much as I can anyway.
Yeah.
but I don't feel like anyone's pushing me but me.
Okay, good. That's a good place to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the way it is.
Yeah.
The boss doesn't bother you, chasing you for paperwork.
Yeah.
I'm just fortunate. I'm fortunate in my life. I met the right people. I met the right girl. I made contact with a bunch of people here.
Yeah.
It's a blessing.
Yeah.
I mean, just to be part of this.
Yeah.
Just to be part of this.
You were the one that was with Bonnie the last couple months.
Yes.
That's what an incredible thing. I mean, it's dark and yet it's a privilege in the same way.
I never thought of that. It's true.
Yeah.
I was just saying, hey, watch her. They're all trying to when someone came in the room, she wasn't as good, but when someone came in the room, I went out and it was fortunate. Didn't have to happen. She didn't have to. But she went.
Yeah.
No matter what should have been, what didn't. It's happened.
Yeah.
It's like, all this. It's like I think. It's like that with that lady. I think this. No matter what you think, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really think. I mean, I drove her a lot, and you drove her a lot too.
Not a lot, but
towards
a number of times, yeah.
Quite a bit.
Yeah.
Not a lot, but quite a bit.
Yeah.
Back and forth.
Yeah.
I was frightened when I drove her.
Yeah.
Hitting, when
every
you
time
see,
it came upon a bump, like crawl along it like a slug at 5
when you see
kilometers.
the tunnel,
Yeah.
I tried to avoid that. That's how.
Yeah.
That would really throw her for loop shots.
Yeah. Yeah.
Down Bloor Street,
Just that short stretch to Christie, yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to keep beeping the horn. Go ahead, beep the horn.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was bugging her too.
Really? Oh, of course it would. Yeah.
The food. Donut. She's in a master's restaurant.
Yeah.
She could only eat certain foods. Sure. Clearly, she didn't have that under control. Don't tell me that it's donut time.
Yeah,
It's never donut time.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I actually, she said just a couple of months before she left us that one of the very few things she could eat was grass-fed beef. And oh yeah.
She could eat it.
She's able to get sandwiches here.
Thank you.
Mike.
Thank you.
It's Mike, right? Yeah.
Thank you
It's
so
nice
much.
to see you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Nice to hear you talk.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really nice.
Yeah. But I actually think like grass-fed beef could have saved her. Given it a few more years. I tried to get her on it, but I was just starting to read up on it, and I don't know, who knows.
Yeah, it doesn't have the carcinogens of this to keep the beef.
Yeah, there's a lot of shit in the regular beef.
Nitrates. That's what I'm looking for. The nitrates.
Yeah, I don't know what. I don't know enough about it.
But you say grass-fed beef, but I think the NW were actually serving that.
Really?
They were saying the year that Bonnie died, and the new NWs had these pictures of the food, how they got their coffee, and pictures of the Brazilian bean field, and everything was supposed to be excellent. They were saying that beef might have been saying that beef was natural or something.
Yeah, often they'll say hormone free,
but she could eat A&W. We were looking. I remember going to the A&W from here.
Yeah. Really. Yeah.
We all went into the details of that.
Yeah.
Really, how really is. Really, how it is.
Oh, really? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's what Bonnie.
They're little bastards, too. Whoever refuses.
You have her phone number?
I've got her email address.
May I?
Sure. Yeah.
She shouldn't change it. That's her gift. She's wants to preserve that life. She wants to keep it right here.
Yeah, I wrote a letter.
She won't give up on it.
She asked for a letter, and then I was glad to provide one, and she was happy with it. And, yeah.
Thank you, Ed.
Yeah.
Are you originally from Toronto?
No. Actually, I was born in London, England. And we came over when I was 10 months old and lived in the Toronto area most of my life. So we landed in Montreal, stayed with friends in Hamilton for 2 years, then moved to Toronto. Actually, just up the street, Bernard Avenue.
I lived on Burner. I lived at 1 Burner.
Really?
No, 28, right on the corner of Burner and St. George.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Had a perfect building.
Oh, for me it was Huron and okay. For us it was Huron and Bernard, southwest corner, basement apartment, just a grungy little place.
My daughter, I became a single father, and my daughter went to. I lived at 88 Burner.
Simon?
Yeah.
I love that you have
88 Burner. Right?
Okay.
Do you remember? Right around the corner from.
Yeah, I know that building. It's on Bernard. It's like a flat rectangular.
They used to have crazy decorations.
Really?
Halloween.
Really? Yeah. My only Halloween, like trick-or-treating, was when I was 3 years old on Bernard Avenue.
Yeah.
And then my mother discovered the truth of the Jehovah's Witness faith. And I said, no more Christmas, no more Halloween, no more birthdays, no more Easter, and praise Jehovah.
Jewish people aren't even allowed to say that word.
Yeah, that's right.
It's the name of God.
Yeah.
No, I'm not allowed to say it.
Really? Oh,
because it's
yeah.
the name. No,
I
I don't.
know, you're right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I will say the witnesses.
Really?
It's not
But
my,
the road goes to.
I think if I put a gun in my head, I'm going to say it.
Yeah.
But, it's the witnesses. You used to see them on the corner selling the watchtower.
Oh, yeah, I know.
So your mom became a.
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice. That was such a cute thing.
Oh, when she was up there. Yeah.
Everybody was so special.
Yeah. Yeah, it was all from the heart. There's no, I don't think there was a single phony word up there. It was all from the heart.
I can't wait to read your book.
Yeah. It's funny, in the, like on Facebook in the world anti-psychiatry community, I'm actually becoming a known, if minor figure, just from my sounding off on Facebook. Like, I'll often use Facebook to try out rhetoric or arguments or whatever. And it's a good way to just sort of float or test, a paragraph or so. And I've had friend requests from like all kinds of like academics and from David Oates, the founder of Mind Freedom. That's probably the most prestigious anti-psychiatry organization in the world. And, he sent me a friend request and things like that. So it's encouraging, It's,
Because psychiatry.
No.
I'll tell you.
Well, you know what? I'm very grateful for that one doctor taking over the entire care. That's how she did it. I fired the psychiatrist and I fired the other pediatrician. That's how I did it. At 17. Amazing. Fired those two and she took over everything. She's not in favor of medication. That's the thing. Yeah. I would not say she's anti-psychiatry, but she's
She was a psychiatrist.
She was a psychiatrist. Really?
I don't know how I'm gonna
Really
get these cities.
love it.
Yeah.
So I'll just.
He was a singer?
Unless
He
there's
is.
somebody
He is.
here that
Yeah.
might be
Wow.
Well known,
Ken or-
Really?
very well known. Became my best friend.
Really?
I went through some trauma.
She used to smoke?
Yeah.
Divorce.
No. Yes.
I became a single dad.
In class?
Yeah.
Well, but that was a very long time ago.
Oh my
Got some of the trouble myself.
Yeah.
So Shane,
As a
if you
result,
wanna, if you're gonna
you know,
email, can you
I
link
went
me, can you
on
pin the
presses.
email, that way then they.
Went on
Yeah, are they Torontonians?
well, YouTube.
Okay.
Really, yeah.
And and then every time he called me up. He got me more of those than a little white
Yeah.
values.
Oh, there's so many. There's so many.
Values are
Okay.
take two,
He said that to you. Really?
take another one. How long's it been?
You know, I
And
It just strung out.
I said, no, I'm worried about the fucking wife.
Yeah.
If you guys want, there's a box here and
Okay.
this table. These are things that belong to Bonnie that we're just distributing to friends. So if there's anything you would like
All right.
to sort of remember,
All
Bonnie,
right.
you're welcome to.
I'm Michael.
Hi, Michael. Nice to meet you.
I met you last time you went to Bonnie's house.
Oh yes, okay. Yeah. Yeah. Good to
Nice
see
to
you
see you
again.
again.
Yeah. Yes, I'm glad you were able to come. Yeah.
I know Bonnie through L'Oreal.
Okay.
And, she's
That's the night.
He was with her when she passed.
Okay. Yes. Yes.
Like, I mean, he's the only one in
we
the
were
room
out
at
of
the
town
time.
and when we heard that she was in the hospital, we came right back.
I'll tell you
We
something.
had rented this cabin for the holidays. We just came back.
Oh, yeah.
Just came back actually in time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, actually,
That's, that was really good that you were able to be there. I didn't make it back in time. I couldn't get a flight back in time. Yeah. Halifax.
Halifax.
Yeah.
No way.
But anyway, I got to know Bonnie for about 6, 8 months. And, L'Oreal's working here, and I drove her home. We got to know her pretty well. She'd have these little meetings, and she'd set up these little meetings. I'd run to the A&W and get her some food, Tim Hortons or Masters or whatever. You know.
Yeah.
I got to know her. I knew I was kind of blessed to meet her.
Yeah.
For lack of a word.
Yeah.
Privilege.
Yeah. I'm so glad you came today.
So I'm so glad I did too.
One of those shirts?
I'm gonna just go tell the others about but if you want to take anything to remember.
Might just do that.
Yes, go for it.
Yeah. Wow.
For some inspiration. Some Bonnie inspiration.
I will say, 18 years, and the only two things I have prescribed now, one is propranolol, but that's very rarely used.
Yeah.
And only under certain circumstances. Bonnie actually okayed that one, surprisingly.
Yeah. But that's more of an antihypertensive, right?
That's right. And when that's probably why she was okay with it. And I use 40 milligrams every so often if I am, let's say, flying somewhere. I will use that to hopefully put a damper on the symptoms, the gum chewing thing. But the thing that I find works the very best is marijuana. But only
It
one
was
strain.
so good to see you.
A specific, very low THC strain.
Yeah.
It's like 5% CBD. Like it's like 8% CBD, 5% THC, which the only point, and this is what I tell people.
Judy, stuff in the box. Check out the box.
Yeah, check it out.
Check out the box.
Yeah.
Oh, you got a camera. Okay, I'm gonna get going. Yeah,
I know.
But anyway, yeah.
Oh, no, this I would have been that a few years ago at the library, which is no longer there. But it was like coffee, it had stripes.
I will look. Yeah.
Okay.
It's possible it's mine American.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because they took a lot of stuff from like, that's the most important stuff, okay, but just the fact that they took it.
So let's connect.
Some of the years you guys are mentioning, and for like most notable achievements, I was born in one of those years, so I was born 20 years ago. And for most.
Rich story.
I just gotta figure out to write that story. That's
Pretty good. Okay. Nice combination. Not
I just don't know, a lot of us were surprised. It was so beautiful, but I had no idea.
Oh, yeah.
And I went for Shiva, and said, wow. She held her funeral at Christian.
This is Bonnie's stuff here.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm gonna get you some water.
She wasn't religious, but she was very, very strong.
I'll go get you water.
Thank you.
Very-
You know where it is, right?
Yeah.
I took this picture
Anti-Semitism.
and her
Yeah, this is her stuff, yes. My grandfather actually, but I don't, I guess, actually, oh, probably 50% sarcodic. I'm proud of that. I know it looks like I have lost. I don't use sarcodic, but, her father's
Yes. Yeah, she knew about it too. Are you getting a phone here? Somebody's phone?
Yeah, they were very challenging to funeral.
yeah, I heard of
Maybe Rebecca?
well, I'd never been to a Jewish funeral.
Anybody's phone?
Absolutely.
That was me, I think.
Absolutely, and
I
Yeah,
think
you
it's
don't,
mine.
you don't wanna forget it.
I help.
Okay, thank you, you're right, I'll put it in my pocket. So that
Good idea.
Text me, send me a note.
Call.
Because life is too short.
I'll put your water right here.
Invested too much.
Oh, you don't need to feel. Anyway, yeah, so.
Yeah.
You know what else? You can say is, lawyers and
Yeah.
I want a room for me. I do, I basically.
Makes a difference.
Don't forget.
Vicarious
Vicarious liability.
For
For human rights stuff, it's especially relevant, because it's right there in the law that vicarious liability applies. So if they want to, if they're blaming their employees for operational disruptions.
What happens to this stuff when you don't take it? There's still a group that's working. Because I don't want to take too much, but I don't want people to throw it out. That's what I'm
Camera. Oh, no, it's a flash. Oh, yeah.
Oh, really? L'Oreal.
Yes.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, what's up? See you again.
Do you know Karen? Mom.
Who?
Of course. It was like that's
Very this first birthday or something.
Edmonton and the first. I think it's the area where you're going.
There's nothing at the corner of
I'm
the
happy with the rest of the
Now,
You're gonna be going to
it's
bed.
now, okay, it's just
Yes,
like-
there was,
There were.
and it's some
You become your own therapist or something, I'm not sure what.
They're right
there.
there.
So I don't know if it's appropriate anymore.
when I went in, this is what the first round that is.
Okay.
How does that question? It's
I think so.
Yeah, so,
They look sort of, it's from Jerusalem.
Okay.
Nothing I would want to.
I'll remember this. I can't believe I just,
I don't know.
yeah. So it's a candle putter out. Whatever they're
Oh,
called.
she's, that's.
Yeah.
Oh.
I honestly.
She's very slim and very well.
I don't know. Oh, I've seen them. I've only met some new examples. I remember one of the love lunches, I got 500
Yeah.
That blew me away.
I like that. I was there too.
I had no idea
That's
that
good.
many people voted for.
Great, yeah, I think so. And were you at the Shiva?
Yeah, I was.
Yeah, I met you at the Shiva.
That was the first time I've been to one of those.
Okay, yeah.
It's, it's really